Well, it's good to see all of you back today. So glad that you're here with us. As Pastor Scott mentioned, we celebrated Easter last week. It was a great day. 442 people showed up to one of our two services, which is always fun. It's always fun to see new faces and to meet a bunch of new people. And so that's what got to happen. But really what gets us excited are numbers like these. And it's that 16 people indicated that they took some step of faith last week. I mean, that's worth getting excited. Yeah. Oh, we're so happy. We should be excited about that because it is fun to watch as people's lives begin to change, as they begin to, more and more surrender themselves to Jesus Christ. And so that's always fun, especially as a pastor. That's what we feel like, our responsibility is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus. And so that's always exciting. But then one of our responsibilities is then to help them grow, as you could imagine. And so we send everybody that fills out a card. We don't just, say, yay, they checked a box. If they check a box and it says that, hey, I received Jesus as my Lord and Savior, we make sure to get them some information. We send them what we call a Kickstart pack in the mail, and it's got a Bible and a Bible reading plan and a little book, and then lots of information and suggestions about ways that they can begin growing in their faith and some next steps that we feel like they need to take that would benefit them. And so one of those next steps is water baptism. And we talk about that a lot because Jesus himself was baptized. It's like if Jesus got baptized, then maybe we should get baptized. That should indicate our faith in Jesus Christ. And so, and he commanded us to. He told us when he left, he said, I want you to go and I want you to make disciples, baptizing them in my name. And so that's what we do. So every couple of months, we try to provide an opportunity to do that. And so over the next couple of weeks, we would like to do that. We would like to provide an opportunity for people to be baptized. And so if at the course of recent weeks or months, if you have made any kind of decision as you stepped into a relationship with Jesus, or maybe you're kind of reigniting or restarting your faith in Jesus, maybe you kind of left things behind when you were a kid, but now you're sort of restarting things, and you want that fresh start, and you want to commemorate that and get baptized as an adult, we would love to give you an opportunity to do that. And here's the thing: don't talk yourself out of it. It's so easy to do. I realize, and we're going to talk about that in just a little bit, but don't talk yourself out of it. I promise it'll be a day you won't forget. And here's what you can do. You can go to ridgechurch.com/baptism, and you can fill out the form there. It's real simple to do. Or just right now, if you want, like even right now, you could take your connection card at the bottom of your worship guide, give us some information so that we can contact you, and then check the little box that says, I want to be water baptized. And we'll make sure that happens. We'll get you scheduled. So would love to see a lot of people do that over the next few weeks. So, all right. Well, here we go. Well, we're kicking off this brand new series. It's called Bridges, Bends, and Barriers. And here's the premise. We're talking about how to prepare for what's next. How to prepare for what's next. Because there's always something on the horizon. There's always something coming. And even just in a very, small practical sense, we know what this is like because sometimes when you're at things, you're like right in the middle of something, but all you're really thinking about is that next thing you got to get to. If you've ever been like in a meeting, but you've got another meeting, and so you're at the meeting that you were on time for, but you're thinking about not being late for your next meeting. It's just kind of the way we're wired, right? Well, that's the way it works in life as well. That there's seasons of life that we walk through, big seasons of life where we transition out of one and into another. There's lots of beginnings and there's lots of endings as we go through life. And so these are what some of them look like. Sometimes there's, when you're young, it's like I'm thinking about, I just want to drive. I want to have freedom, I want to get my driver's license. Kind of the milestones of life, some things that we look at and we think, okay, this is where I am now. This is where I want to be. How do I get there? Okay? Graduation. There's lots of preparation that it takes. Like if you have graduation on your brain, there's some things you have to do to prepare for that, whether it's high school or college or maybe a doctoral degree, whatever it is. Maybe it's a job, getting a new job, entering the workforce. Maybe you've got a job change that's coming up. Maybe you're in the middle of one. Maybe you're right in the middle. Maybe you know that it's going to happen in the next 5 years or so, but that may be your thing. It's like, I know there's going to be a season of transition coming up. Maybe it's a wedding that's coming up soon. And so you're preparing for that, right? I'm going to go from being single to being not single. So maybe there's some things I need to do to prepare. Maybe it's building a home or getting a new home or moving and getting, transitioning somewhere. Maybe it's, like just moving to a whole other city. That's a possibility. Maybe it's your finances. You're entering a new season. Your salary is going to go up. Lifestyle is going to change. Or maybe it's actually going to go down. There's an economy thing. And, my retirement funds are just not looking so hot. And so we're going to have to kind of tighten things up. And so you may be in a new season financially. Maybe you're having kids. Maybe you're going to have more kids. Maybe you're going to foster. Maybe you're going to adopt. We would recommend those things. Maybe that's, that would be a new season. Got to prepare for that. Maybe it's an empty nest thing. You're on the other end of the spectrum, and your kids are like within the next 4 or 5 years, they're all going to be gone, or you hope they're going to be gone, right? At some point, yes. And so you're looking at like, what's life going to look like now? Things are going to look different. And then retirement, maybe you've gotten to a place where you realize, okay, I think in the next few years, I'm going to be retiring. Am I ready for that? Am I prepared? How do we prepare for that next season? Because sometimes, and this is why we went with this name, because sometimes it feels like we get to a season of transition and it's just like easy. It's just like crossing over a bridge. Well, I know the path in front of me. I know how to get there. I know where I want to go. And so I'm just gonna go. But sometimes it's a little more, twists and turns than that, and there's bends in the road and you can't quite see around what's next. Way off in the horizon where you want to end up, but you're not real sure how to get there, what it's going to be like. And then sometimes it's just flat out barriers every step of the way. It's like, I don't know that I'm going to be able to get to the other side of this. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get there. And there's just things that keep pushing back at you and keep you from moving forward. Because every season of transition has some changes that occur. This is the kicker. Whether you're looking forward to it or not, I'm excited about this new season. It doesn't matter if it's a looming thing or if you're excited about it. Changes occur, no matter what the season of transition looks like. Isn't that right? There's just a change in perspective, a change in scenery, a change in your circumstances. You change a little bit, and so things look different. That brings challenges, right? There's challenges that go along with that as you're trying to look around the curve and try to navigate and know what's next. There's some things that make it difficult. And as those changes and challenges come your way, it gets stressful. Am I right? Whether you're looking forward to it or not. Have you ever met a bride who was looking forward to her wedding day that is stressed out? Right? I mean, it's just something we go through. That's just the nature of transition. And I remember for me, what came to my mind as I was thinking about this, I grew up in a small town in South Georgia, and my parents decided to take a job in Pensacola, Florida. My dad took a job in Florida. He's right over here, so he knows I'm not lying. And so this was, when I was in middle school. So it was like the very beginning of 8th grade. Already a difficult season, right? Anybody attest to that? 3 years of middle school is like scary. Feels like an entire eternity, right? It can be tough. And so we move it right 6 weeks into the school year. And you know what that's like. Everybody's kind of got their routine going, and I don't, and I'm the new guy, and I've never moved before, and I'm scared to death. And this is like a really huge school to me. I left a really small school, and I ended up at this really big school, and it was scary, and it was just a middle school, and so it was like just kids everywhere. And I remember it was this girl who took me around, kind of toured me around. I guess she was like an office aide or something. And she was just like, everywhere we go, she'd trash talk a teacher or, talk. And I was like, you're bothering me. Like, you're scaring me a little bit. That's kind of how I was feeling. And I don't remember, a whole lot else except that I got to PE and the PE coach literally cussed me out because I was late. Because I didn't know where I was. I'm not kidding. I walked all the way around the outside of the school before I finally found where I was supposed to be. I was late. I got home, not kidding. I got home and I got off the bus and I had to go to the bus. It was my first day, my last day there too, by the way. And I got home and I was crying. I don't mind. I'm a man. I cry sometimes. And I was crying. That made my mom cry because she was like, oh my goodness, she felt so bad. And so literally by the next week, I ended up in a small private school. So it's like, whoo, got out of that one. It's kind of how it felt. It was a rough transition. Why? Well, because it was uncomfortable. There were uncertainties. There were things I didn't know to expect, things that were a little scary. I was apprehensive. There were changes. There were challenges. It was stressful. It was scary. And seasons like that just aren't a lot of fun. And so my question is, as we're kind of setting the foundation here, that we're going to ask throughout this series is, what can we do then now to prepare for what's next, for where we're going next? How do we get from the now to the then safely, like just crossing over a bridge? How do we get there? How do we prepare? Can we prepare? And the short answer is yes. But I'm going to suggest to you that there are initially, before we jump into today's kind of practical application, there's a couple of conditions that we have to consider first that we've got to get in check, because we get hung up on these. Christians, we get hung up on these sometimes, and if we don't get them right, then it's going to be a rocky road. And I like the ice cream either, you know what I'm saying? And this is the first one. Who you are now will be who you are then. I know that sounds real obvious, but so many of us, we get in our mind that, well, in the next season, then I'm going to start blank, right? Oh, well, I'm just not going to do that now, but when things get better, when my finances turn around, when I get the new job, when we get married, when I get older, when I get smarter, when things change, then I will do the things that I need to do. And we fall into that trap, and it's dangerous, because we think that somehow, miraculously, magically, when we enter the new season that we're moving towards, that we're just going to be different. But the truth is, the habits and the patterns of behavior that define who you are now will define who you are then. It's just the way it goes. So if we could just hang on to that and remember that, then we'll be willing to actually do some of these things that we're talking about. The second is this: preparation, not promises, produces progress. I like that because there's a lot of peas. Pastors like peas. I learned that a long time ago. I don't know why. But it kind of, it's easier to remember. Preparation, not promises, is what produces progress. And let me explain. You've seen it happen in marriages. Somebody will get to their wedding day, and they've thought a lot about their wedding day, and they've prepared for that wedding day, and yet the couple hasn't given a whole lot of thought to their marriage days, right? And so they get to the altar, and they say their I do's, they say their promises, and then things aren't the way they thought they would be. And if you've been married for longer than just a few months, right, then you know that I do doesn't always mean I will, right? I do doesn't always mean I can. I'm going to, there's not necessarily a correlation between making a promise and the way things are going to be in marriage. It's why it's so important to prepare ahead of time, because that's what makes the difference. So then, with those two things in mind, what can we do now? And so we're going to talk about one of those ideas today. And thankfully, it's all throughout Scripture. This is a principle that's taught all throughout the Old Testament. God himself speaks through Moses and says this over and over again. And then Jesus, of course, picks up on it during his ministry, talks about it, gives some illustrations. And then years later, Jesus' brother James does the same thing. He takes this very practical application, this very practical principle, and he illustrates it in such a significant way. It's such a powerful thing, but it's so practical and simple that we have a tendency to miss it. We just kind of glance over it because it's like, okay, that's obvious. I mean, we're so good at that. It's like, yeah, that's good. That's so good. And then we move on. But if we would get this thing, it's going to make the next 4 weeks work. Without getting this right, the next 4 weeks won't matter a whole lot. And so here's what James says in his letter. He says, do not merely listen to the word or read, in our context, it'd be like reading it or, podcasting it or however we get there, sitting in a sermon, sitting in a message like this. Do not merely listen or read or hear the word and so deceive yourselves. James is saying, look, don't just think that hearing it is enough, because that's a trap and you've only deceived yourself. But we have a tendency to do that, don't we, Christians? I mean, we're so good at this. We think, well, just by being in the room, as long as I was there and my attendance was up, I went the whole series and I heard it and I knew exactly what I needed to do. And we think, well, that's enough. I heard the word. And so somehow he said, don't fall into that trap. You're just going to deceive yourselves. And Christians fall into that trap all the time. Am I right? We just hear. It's like, I was here. I heard it. He said, don't do that. Instead, do this. What it says. Do what it says. It's like, yeah, see, that's why we read that and it's like, yeah, good. And that's kind of how we do, isn't it? I mean, Christians, we have a tendency to hear things and to think, and we kind of equate like feeling really guilty and convicted. Like during a message, it's like, oh, pastor, it's kind of that kind of thing. And we feel really, convicted. We equate that with like some sort of, spiritual encounter with God. It's like the worse we feel, the more connected I was with God that day. And it's like, oh, pastor, that's so good. And we get the spiritual moves. That's to a guest, it's like, what are they doing? What's all the mooing going on? It's like, And that was such a good, powerful message, Pastor. Oh, what a message. That really convicted me. I'm not going to do anything about it. But man, it was so convicting. And we don't say that, but it's what we do. I mean, so often we fall into that trap. We deceive ourselves. And we don't actually, we hear it, and then we walk out and we don't ever really intend to do anything about it. And he says, don't live that way. Do what it says. And then he continues. Anyone who listens to the word and does not do what it says, and then he gives us this great illustration. It may be one of the best illustrations there is. It rivals some of Jesus. Like, this is a really good one. You can tell, like, he and his brother, they talked some, And so this is such a great illustration. Don't ever forget this. It works so well. He says, don't just do what it says. If you do that, you just hear it and you don't actually do what it says. It's like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. James is saying, look, for you to sit in a place like this and hear some powerful messages and hear some, or to read your Bible and to check some boxes that, hey, I read my Bible, or, sit in Bible studies or sit in, a small group and hear things and learn things and memorize things. For you to do that, it's like, but then not do anything about it. It's like somebody going and looking in a mirror and saying, wow, something's got to be fixed about this, something's not quite right. You're looking in the mirror, it's like, You ever done that? It's like, You get up in the morning, you think, what happened since last night? All I did was sleep, and I got a good mattress. Something happened. And then you walk away and you go to work. I mean, nobody does that, right? In the real world, nobody is going to do that when it comes to appearances. Nobody's going to get up and look in the mirror and say, well, gosh, wow, I see some real problems there. All right, going to work. I mean, nobody's going to do that because we know, why is that? We know in the real world that nobody gets credit for looking in the mirror. Right? I just got up today and I looked in the mirror and I decided, like, I was pretty comfy in the bathrobe and slippers, and so I just went to work. Hair sticking up, a little greasy, bags under my eyes, got like a 7 o'clock shadow going on, and I'm just looking rough. Here's the thing. You may get away with that for like a day, right? And I don't even know that you would. Like, it'd be a rough day. And somebody's coming up to you and saying, dude, like, what's going on? Did you forget to look in the mirror this morning? No, I looked in the mirror. This is what we do. No, I looked in the mirror, and I saw, man, looking rough. Need to shave. Man, would you pray for me, brother? No, I'm not. Are you kidding me? Go shave, dude. Like, I don't have to pray for you. There's nothing to pray about. You know what needs fixing. No, I'm just telling you. I don't really want to. Just pray for me. Would you just pray for me? It doesn't make any sense. You don't get away with that, right? When it comes to appearances in the real world, we don't get away with that. But in the spiritual realm, Christians all the time, we get up and we look in the mirror and we see things that maybe need to get tweaked and need to get fixed, and then we don't do anything about it. And it becomes a problem, right? I mean, it doesn't really work well that way. You see, when you throw that next one up, when you see something, but do nothing, you won't be prepared for what's next. That's why it's a problem. That's why it's an issue. When you see something, you look directly in the mirror, and yet you walk away, and Christians do this all the time. And here's my concern. There will be droves of Christians tomorrow morning who wake up and they look in the mirror and they see what needs to be fixed, and they'll stand there as long as they need to until things get better, and then they'll walk off and they'll go to work. And yet when it comes to their behaviors and their language and their relationships and their lifestyles, they know what needs fixing, they know what they need to do, and they've heard it 1,000 times, and yet they won't do anything about it. And it's concerning. And you won't be prepared for the next season, for marriage, for your financial shift, for the job change, for the new move. You're just going to carry with you the habits and the patterns of behavior that you had with you in this season into the next. That's what will begin to happen. James says, don't do that. And then he creates for us a contrast. He says, but whoever looks intently, and looks intently, I had to go look. I was like, what's the Greek word for that? It's parakoupto, okay? And you can find that yourself. Parakoupto is the word. And literally it means just to stop and take a knee, or to bend over and examine. So stopping what you're doing, stop and smell the roses is kind of that picture. Stop, gaze intently, examine something that's in front of you, and really give it a long look, really gazing into it. And he's saying, whoever looks intently into the perfect law. And I want to talk about that for just a second, because James is not talking about, and he was a Jew talking probably to Jews, but he probably wasn't talking about the law of Moses or the Torah, or the 630 or so commands that the Jews had to follow all the time. He wasn't necessarily, he was saying, no, the perfect law. The perfect law. When you look into the perfect law, well, here's what I think James is talking about, is that law is the law as it was interpreted and fulfilled by Jesus. That's the perfect law. That's when the law was perfected through the person of Jesus. What Jesus did made the law perfect, the way he talked about it. And so, and just to backtrack a little bit, just to give you some context here, Jesus was often asked, what is it, what's the greatest commandment? Which was not an unusual question, especially for a rabbi. They were just trying to, test the waters a little bit to see if he was really going to be a little too crazy, a little too out there initially. And they just said, what's the greatest commandment? And he would answer like any good Jew would answer. So there was nothing unusual about this. He would say, well, the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. Or some variation of that. And that's what he would say. And they would say, okay, that's right. But then he would turn it around and he'd say, but the second is like it. In other words, there's another one that's not just similar, it is like it. It is equal to. It's not subordinate to, it is equal to. And it's this: love your neighbor as yourself. And I thought, well, hold on. I thought it was just about my relationship with God. No. Your relationship with God is actually shown through your relationship with other people. And Jesus talked about it all the time. And he was saying all of the law and all of the commands can be summed up into these two commands. In other words, if you follow these two things, you will walk and live an amazing life. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. What a difference. And they thought, fantastic. But then Jesus took it even a step further. And the night before he was to be crucified, he was meeting with his disciples, and you may know how that story goes. And he was talking with them, and he was sharing, he was saying, look, I realize y'all have heard a lot of things. You've heard a lot of things, and we've kind of fleshed out a lot of stuff that's really on the table. But if you forget everything I've said, if you forget the 630, if you forget the 2, then let me just give you the one thing that I want you to do. Let me just boil it down for you. And he takes it down to one thing. This is what I never want you to forget to do. It's this new command. He even called it a new command. And he said, love one another. Oh, well, that's not really new. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. Okay, now that was different. That was a little unexpected. And they had no idea at the moment just how powerful that statement was, not realizing that just a few hours later, Jesus would give his life for them, the ultimate act of love. Oh, goodness. So you're telling me if I'm to love other people, love one another the way that you have loved me, then that means me being willing to give myself up for other people. Is that what you mean? That's what I mean. That's the perfect law. That's the law of Christ. It's the law of love. And when you gaze intently into that law, when you filter and you use that statement as a grid for everything that you do and everywhere you go and everything that you say, it will begin to make a tremendous difference in the way that you prepare yourself for every season of life and everything that life has to throw you. And so he continues, and it's that perfect law that gives freedom. Whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom. Isn't that interesting? It's like, well, how does freedom work into this? What does that have to do with it? Because I always think law means, slavery, or kind of coming under authority. But law and freedom don't really seem to go together. But here's what he's promising. Listening and doing now results in freedom later. In other words, just obedience to the things that he's calling you to, looking into the mirror, seeing what needs to be fixed, doing it, feels like obligation now, but ultimately it results in freedom. You just didn't realize it. Oh, and it's freedom that you just never expected. It's like, wow, I had no idea that it could be this good. And let me give you an example of this. When it comes to, think about things that Jesus talked about all the time, and one of those was money and generosity. And you've probably heard a message or two. If you've been in church for any length of time, you've heard somebody talk about our need to be generous. Jesus talked about it all the time. He said, don't hold on too tightly to your wealth and your money. Don't put your trust in things that will eventually die and wither, but put your faith in me. And he talked about, he said, loosen your grip so that you can trust in me. I want you to trust me. Don't worry about, I'm going to take care of you. I know what you need. Talked about it over and over, and it's like, I've heard those messages, I've heard it. And he even said, and so I want you to order things this way, by being generous off the top. I want you to give first. I want you to just let it go up front instead of waiting. We think, well, that just sounds like obligation. I can't do that. And so we've heard those messages, and it's like, well, maybe in the next season, right? Well, maybe later. My habit now is no chance, but later when I have, when everything's in order and I get my debt paid down and, everything's okay, then I'll start giving. It's like, no. I want you to give now. I want you to be generous now. It's like, well, why would I be generous now? Why in the world? Like, I can't, that doesn't sound like freedom to me. That sounds like, I'm being enslaved. It sounds like obligation. But freedom to me, to you and me, it's like having tons of money, like swimming in it, and then living however I want. And then maybe if there's a little bit left over and my heartstrings are tugged when I show up at that, that special service and they're taking up a special offering, then maybe I'll give a little bit, I can do that. That would be freedom to us. And yet he said, no, it's just the opposite. It's letting go first off the top. And then there's freedom following that. And here's the thing, I can't explain it to you or promise it to you except that he promises it. And I can't explain it just because I've experienced it. It's something you have to really experience for yourself. I was taught that a long time ago when I was a kid. In like one of my first seasons of life, right? I just was taught, with my $5.82 to give 58 cents. I mean, that's just what I did. If I made 10, I gave 1. I just didn't know any better, Well, guess what? That habit then followed me. And every single season since then, that's just how I've done it. It's not even a question. When I put our budget together, even today, I don't even look at what comes out off the top. It's not a question. Well, I got bills to pay. Well, I got debt to take care of. It's not even a question. I take it off the top and assume it's not there. I live on the 90. We figure out how to save and to live on the 90. And we're not wealthy. I assure you. It's not because, well, we're just in such an incredible situation, therefore we can do that. It's just what I've always done. Even when I was a broke, college student. I just did it. And that habit carried with me. And I can tell you now that there is financial freedom that I cannot explain to you. Well, it's like, well, why do we give anyway? You know, what's the point? Well, it's because, you ready for this? No, not a trick question. It's because it helps people. Giving, our generosity, helps other people. And if we're supposed to look at the commands that Jesus gives us and the things that he says through the filter of love everybody as I have loved you, then guess what? It becomes real obvious what we're supposed to do. Well, I'm supposed to help people. And my generosity helps other people. And man, there is such freedom in that. When we begin to live that way, it's something you have to experience for yourself. And then he says this: whoever looks intently into that perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, in other words, doesn't stop there, hears it, sees it, knows what needs to be corrected, looks directly into that mirror, into that perfect law, and knows what needs to be done, walks out of the service and doesn't just kind of feel, so good, but actually says, I'm going to continue in this. I'm going to live this way. I'm going to make this the pattern of my life, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it. Then the promise is they will be blessed in what they do. We misinterpret that sometimes, and we think, well, therefore, when I live that way, what I do will be blessed. Right? Or we think, that I'm going to have blessings poured out. If I, reap what I sow. If I give 10, I'm going to get back 100. That's the way people start to think. And it's like, no. He's saying you're going to be blessed. Not that what you do is going to be blessed. He's saying, now it will be through you feeling blessed. You experiencing, and blessing is what? It's just happiness. It's contentment. It's fulfillment. It's satisfaction. Being blessed in what you do. In other words, the way that you live and the way that you exercise the things that need fixing, the things that need to be done, in the way that you do that, you will begin to experience blessing. You will be satisfied. As you move into that next season of life, you'll be prepared and you will have that sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. Not because everything worked out just right. There's no promise of that. Not because everything went perfect and smoothly and there weren't any, challenges or barriers in the way, but because you are fulfilled in the call that Jesus has placed on you. And you know that you're walking in the direction that he wants you to go. He's not just saying it to you and you're hearing it and you're walking away unchanged. It's you saying, I'm going to run in your direction wherever that goes. If you tell me to run into a brick wall, I'm going to run full speed and assume you're going to put a hole in it for me. That's what he's saying, do. And there is freedom and blessing on the other side. So here's the thought. When it comes to preparing for the next season of life, as we kind of start this, and this is just kind of foundational. This is like, preparation 101, okay? This is just how you get started. This is the habit that you can walk away with today, remembering and thinking about. When you see something, do something. I like simple. I like memorable. And so that we can do. But man, can you imagine if Christians began to apply that? There would never be an issue of funding ministry. There would never be an issue of, are there enough missionaries to go overseas, or do we have enough people to serve on a Sunday morning? Do we have enough, people to go out and evangelize and to talk to people in the streets and to, help people and to serve the poor and the widows and the orphans? It won't even be a question, because we'll see the need and then we'll do something. We'll figure it out. We'll adjust things in our schedule. We'll fix things in our finances. We'll just be willing to, and that's what we've done as we started this church 5 years ago. We took on a good bit of debt because we were pouring our savings and everything we had to get this thing going, because we just trusted that God was going to take care of it. Literally, we just were like, I don't know how this is going to work, but, we're supposed to start this church, and I don't know if anybody's going to show up on the first day, but we're going to give it a go. And we just saw a need, And so we did something. Is that scary sometimes? Does it sometimes look like that's crazy talk? Will sometimes it look like, that's ludicrous. That makes no sense. That doesn't add up. That seems ridiculous to the world. Yeah, that's going to happen sometimes. But man, you have no idea what God wants to do in you and through you until you begin to run in the direction He has called you to run. As you get ready for that next season of life, whatever it is, on this side of graduation or this side of retirement, as you prepare for that next season, when you see something, do something, if you would make that your mantra, just imagine what a difference it would make. So here's how you can start. Just a simple question. What do I need to start doing and stop doing now to prepare for what's next? In order to prepare me for what's next, what are some things I can start doing and some things that I know I need to stop doing in order to prepare? Not, well, I'll start doing that in the next season. Well, I'll start doing that when. Oh, well, don't do that, or you have so deceived yourselves. Don't live that way. Don't fall into that trap. He's saying, do some things now because you already know. I guarantee you, as I've been talking today, you've had thoughts. Oh yeah, I know what it is. There's that addiction that I've just kind of shelved and assumed I would deal with later. There's that stuff that I look at that I know I shouldn't look at, that I just thought, well, maybe one day, when I get married, then it'll take care of it, and so it won't be an issue anymore. Well, I know I'm supposed to be generous, but things are tight right now, and so I'll do that later, when things work out. This is the trap, the cycle. And those habits don't go away until you choose to do something with what you see. Don't look in the mirror and then walk away and not do anything about it. And as you begin to apply this, and you see the things that you need to start doing, and you start doing them, and you see some things you should stop doing. Just make it one thing. Make you just a short list if that's all it takes now. Just get you started. Tell somebody. And as you begin to do that, I promise you, and I can make the promise because I've read the promise, that you will experience blessing. You will experience fulfillment, satisfaction, and peace in the next season that God has prepared for you. Can I pray for you? Heavenly Father, thank you so much for preserving words like these. So simple, so practical that it's so easy to miss. God, I confess to you that I have not always done a good job with that. I have not loved you with my whole heart. And there are times when I want to be selfish, and there's times when I want to run from the things that you would have me do, and yet God, I know better. And I don't want to fall into that trap. God, I pray for all of us that we would begin to recognize, that your Spirit would begin to nudge us, to show us things we need to start doing, to show us things we need to stop doing, to give us the wisdom to see those things as we look into the mirror, into your perfect law of love. But then give us the courage to actually do it. We pray that this would be honoring to you. In Jesus' name, amen.